I've been thinking a lot about river goddesses lately, so I thought I'd share. The title of this video is Celtic River Goddesses, but I'm not suggesting that all Celtic-speaking cultures or all river goddesses are the same. I won't be giving you a template or an archetype that you can apply to all of them. I think reducing everything down that way takes away a lot of meaning. It can flatten a three-dimensional deity who reflects their local culture over a long period of time down to a few keywords. But at the same time, we can get a feeling for the depth and richness of individual deities, or even individual Celtic cultures, by studying the whole. When one goddess has an important myth or a strong set of characteristics, it can help us spot the subtle remnants of something similar in another, as long as we're careful and we don't jump to conclusions. However, I'll just be presenting a bit of evidence and leaving those careful conclusions to you. So let's start with Sequana, the goddess of the Seine in what is now France. Caesar's writing tells us that the Seine was called Sequana. As you can see from the map, the rivers Marne and Seine flow in a sort of parallel arc until the Marne flows into the Seine at Paris. The name Sequana has an uncertain meaning. It might have to do with the rather meager flow of the Seine in its upper reaches. There's also a tribe called the Sequani to the west of the area, whose name may mean people of Sequana. Her temple was obviously an important one, with multiple rooms, baths, and many Roman-style inscriptions in stone. Like the shrine of Maponos, which I've covered in other videos, there was a healing cult connected with Sequana, with pilgrims giving offerings representing themselves or body parts to request healing or to give thanks for being healed. This famous bronze statue of Sequana is also very much in the Roman style. One thing I notice is the ball the duck carries in its beak. Perhaps it's meant to be a nut or a berry brought as an offering to the goddess. This bronze duck from Devon in southwest Britain also carries some kind of an offering in its beak. Waterbirds have a particularly liminal aspect. Maybe this is because they have access to all three of the realms of land, water, and sky. For example, swans and cranes often feature in Irish mythology as birds coming from the other world. Early cultures bordering on the Celts in Central Europe often featured waterbirds on funerary urns called cult wagons. While the Seine was called Sequana, the river Marne was known as Matrona. Matrona's name means divine mother in the language of Gaul, while in Latin, Matrona simply means a respectable woman. Since most inscriptions to Celtic deities are in Latin, this causes a bit of confusion. However, there's no real evidence that any of the other dedications to mother deities are to the goddess Matrona of the Marne. There's a single dedication to Matrona at the source of the Marne, which mentions a temple. Excavations have shown that this was a large temple with 12 rooms decorated with frescoes, including hot baths. Unfortunately, it hasn't been excavated as fully as the Temple of Sequana, so we know a little less about it. Was there a healing cult here too? Or was it just a nice place to come and take a relaxing, sacred bath? Matrona's temple and the source of the Marne are at a place called Belém-sur-Marne. Belém is French for Belisama, the name of another goddess. There's still some discussion among linguists as to whether that root bel in names like Belisama or Belinos means bright and brilliant or forceful and powerful. These days, forceful seems to be winning the debate. The end of the name Belisama is a superlative suffix, making her the most powerful. Noemi Beck, in her dissertation Goddesses in Celtic Religion, suggests that Belisama may have been a goddess of war. With only 2 surviving inscriptions to her, we don't have much to go on. One inscription associates her with Minerva, but the other doesn't. And I'll just add that there's no real evidence to link Belisama to Belinos, either as a consort or a female counterpart. The masculine version of her name would be closer to Belisamaris, a deity mentioned in an inscription in the region of the Aedui. It also appears that a number of place names in modern-day France originally referenced Belisama. It's interesting that these aren't confined to any particular region, so there must be more to Belisama than the 2 inscriptions imply. The 2nd century geographer Ptolemy mentions a river in western Britain called the Belisama. This is generally thought to be the river now known as the Ribble, although the Mersey is also a possibility. This gives us our first connection between Belisama and a river. The second connection is the place name at the source of the Marne itself. Linguists are in agreement that the Gaulish Matrona's name undergoes sound changes in Britain, and she emerges as the Welsh goddess Modron, mother of Mabon ap Modron. A few writers have also tried to draw a connection between Modron and Belisama via the Ribble. It's a tenuous connection, but maybe worth considering. Modron, of course, is the mother of Mabon. There's no direct evidence that Matrona was considered to be the mother of Maponos, who I've made many videos about, but it seems likely. In a famous story about Modron, she appears to Irian, the great king of Hreged, at a river ford. She tells him that she comes from Anuvan. They unite at the ford, and Modron later presents him with twins. This echoes the behavior of the Irish Morrigan's meeting with the Dagda at the River Unshin in the Second Battle of Moytuera, and it possibly adds a little weight to the idea of Modron or Belisama having a war and sovereignty aspect. The goddess Modron, in turn, appears to morph into Saint Madron, who in her story travels by sea from Wales to Cornwall with her son, lands at the mouth of the Valency River, and founds a church. There she's associated with two holy wells. This well near Boscastle is in the grounds of the church where St. Madron is said to have lived and been buried. In Ireland, there are stories about Boann, the goddess of the river Boyne. Boann's name is understood to mean white cow. Stories of cows with supernaturally plentiful milk abound in Ireland. These stories aren't directly tied to the goddess Boann, but they give us a sense of the importance of the cow, both symbolically and in everyday life. If you'd like to delve a little deeper into the topics in my videos, you might enjoy taking one of my online classes. There's almost always something on offer. Some classes have tiered pay-what-you-can pricing, and there are usually a few scholarships available for the more expensive classes. To get notifications about classes and about scholarships when they're announced, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter, or follow me on my Patreon page. This is Trinity Well, the source of the River Boyne, near the village of Carbery in County Kildare. It's at the foot of a hill called Carbery Hill, but in Irish mythology this hill was known as Sheath Nechtan, following the belief that old hill forts and burial grounds were entrances to the other world called Sheath. Nechtan's Well is very special in Irish cosmology, believed to be as much in the other world as in this world. It's described in mythology as being surrounded by 9 hazel trees, which drop their nuts into the well. The salmon who live in the well are known as the salmon of knowledge, because they eat the magical hazelnuts. It's a place often referenced in stories. For example, when Manannán mac Lir lures a king called Cormac into the other world in order to impart wisdom to him, Cormac sees a version of the well before he gains entry into Manannán's house. Then he sees in the garth a shining fountain with 5 streams flowing out of it, and the hosts in turn drinking its water. 9 hazels of Buan grew over the well. Purple hazels drop their nuts into the fountain, and the 5 salmon which are in the fountain sever them and send their husks floating down the streams. Now the sound of the falling of those streams is more melodious than any music that men sing. Later in the story, Manannán explains this to him. The fountain which thou sawest with the 5 streams out of it is the fountain of knowledge, and the streams are the 5 senses through which knowledge is obtained. And no one will have knowledge who drinketh not a draught out of the fountain itself and out of the streams. The folk of many arts are those who drink of them both. In this story, emphasis is placed on the 5 senses, because Cormac's kingship and the setting of the story are associated with legal matters like good judgment and the discernment of truth. Using all 5 senses is an important part of discovering the truth. However, there's another story concerning this well, which is more important, and there are 2 versions. Nechtan, who is sometimes called Elkvar, is the owner of the well. He's the husband of Boann. In the simpler version of the story, no one is allowed to visit the well without being accompanied by the 3 official cup bearers. Now, the cupbearers are quite a unique class in Irish mythology because they seem to be able to control water. In battle, they may magically hide all the fresh water from the enemy, driving them mad with thirst. Anyway, in this version, Boand is a haughty, naughty woman, and not only does she go to the well by herself, but she says it has no power over her, and to prove it, she walks 3 times withershins, or anti-clockwise, the direction of malicious magic, around the well. The waters respond by overflowing. Out of the well 3 waves break over her, and suddenly her right thigh, and her right hand, and her right eye burst, and then she fled out of the fairy mound, fleeing the disgrace and fleeing the well, so that she reached the sea with the water of the well behind her, and the Inverbonne drowned her. So this is the story of the creation of the Boyne, brought about, of course, by a woman, and we might question this version of the story, which is repeated in several texts, and wonder whether there's an influence here from patriarchal Christianity. We might wonder whether this myth once cast the goddess of the river in a more positive light, as bringing abundance to her people by freeing the water from the well. But we can't be sure. I don't think we can blame this on Adam and Eve with any certainty. Stories of well maidens and floods are pretty common. In the more complex version of this story, the Dagda tricks Boan's husband, now called Elkvar, so that he and Boan can have a little 9-month-long tryst and conceive the child Angus. Poor old Elkvar's none the wiser, but after the child is born, and Elkvar's return is imminent, Boan runs to the well to wash away the signs of childbirth, and the well bursts over her as in the other story. Interestingly, Angus is considered to be a reflex of Maponos and Mabon, and Boan a reflex of Matrona and Modron. Water's quite a dangerous thing in Irish mythology. It often takes lives and alters the landscape with sudden floods. Although in folklore water has the power to heal, there isn't much of this in the stories of Irish gods. The story of the Boyne isn't the only Irish story of this type. The story of how the river Shannon was formed is similar. Sheenan, the goddess of the Shannon in this case, goes to a place called Conla's Well, which is described like this. Sheenan went to Conla's Well, which is under the sea, to behold it. That is a well at which are the hazels and the inspirations of wisdom, that is, the hazels of the science of poetry, and in the same hour their fruit and their blossom and their foliage break forth, and these fall on the well in the same shower, which raises on the water a royal surge of purple. Then the salmon chew the fruit, and the juice of the nuts is apparent on their purple bellies, and 7 streams of wisdom spring forth and turn there again. This idea of a well under the sea is also a recurring one in Irish myth. Conla's Well seems to be just another name for Nechtan's Well, or at least it has the same nature. As for how it's moved from Carbery to under the sea, well, that's easy. It's otherworldly. It isn't constrained by time or space. But let's go on. Now Sheenan went to seek the inspiration, for she wanted nothing save only wisdom. But the well left its place. After this it overwhelmed her, and she tasted death. What taboo Sheenan has transgressed isn't made clear, but the result is the same as for Boand. She dies, but a river is formed. The Gauls probably also had stories about how the Marne and the Seine were created, but it's impossible to say how similar they were to the stories from Ireland. And while Sequana, at least, was associated with healing, there's nothing obvious to suggest that role for Boan or Sheenan. So this video has only been a quick introduction to river goddesses in different Celtic-speaking cultures. I hope it's given you an idea of the scope of the topic. There are many more gods and goddesses associated with rivers and springs.